All right, it is week number 2, and there is 11 games that is going to be on this week instead of the usual 12, which means that there's going to be 2 teams that is not playing. I don't exactly know who those 2 teams is. I think one of them is Portland, the other I'm not quite sure. But we start off on Saturday at 10 in the morning because apparently MLS love to schedule games very early in the morning for me. I mean, I know it's 1 p.m. Eastern time, but for me, it's 10 a.m. Pacific time, and I really do not like to wake up that early to, watch a game. And for some of you think 10 a.m. is not early. Oh, in my case, it is early. I usually wake up at 12 or 1 p.m. on a Saturday morning or even a Saturday afternoon because I usually stay up very, very late. But first of all, we got Chicago versus Orlando City. Chicago, of course, lost their last match against the Galaxy 2-1, while Orlando City drew 2-2 at home against NYCFC, even though technically they should have won that game because of that botch VAR call right near the second half of the game. In the last 5 meetings, Chicago won 4-0 in the last meeting. They also won 2-1 against Orlando City away. Chicago won 4-0 in the previous home meeting, that is not last year, by a final score of 4-0 also. Orlando City and Chicago drew 0-0 in the 4th meeting, and in the last 5 meetings, Chicago drew 2-2 against Orlando City. So Chicago has been very good against Orlando City in the last 5 meetings, and especially in the last 3 meetings where they completely outscore Orlando City by an aggregate score of 10-1. So, yeah, this is definitely a match that you would think Chicago should be able to win, and they're going to be favorites to win this one. Although, having said that, Orlando City, last week against NYCFC, they definitely looked like a team that may not finish last place. I mean, their attack was actually really decent. I mean, I know there were times where they weren't really clinical whatsoever, but their attack definitely looks really, really good. Although, having said that, they're playing on the road in this game, and playing at home compared to playing on the road is a whole different animal in MLS. And it's harder to play on the road too. So we'll see how Orlando City will do in this game against the Chicago Fire. Next up, New England. They play against the Columbus Crew. New England drew 1-1 to FC Dallas away, but that game must feel like 3 points for them because nobody expected them to go on the road and get a result against FC Dallas. While Columbus, they also drew 1-1 to the Red Bulls at home. Although the Red Bulls, they were playing kind of a B team, so you could say that the Crew was kind of a little bit disappointed that they weren't able to win that game at home. In the last 5 meetings, New England, of course, lost to Columbus 1-0. Columbus drew 2-2 against New England, and then New England won against Columbus 2-1. Columbus, of course, then beat New England 2-0, and then Columbus once again beat New England 2-0 in the last 5 meetings. So, certainly Columbus kind of have a little bit edge in this game. And, it will be very interesting to see what exactly the technical approach that Caleb Porter would do for this Columbus team now that this is the first time that he is taking this Columbus team on the road. And for New England, can they build some momentum from the last game? And can Carlos Gil, who scored that goal last week, can he continue his goal scoring form? Because I've been saying, and pretty much a lot of people has been saying, that even though he was a big acquisition, his stats doesn't really tell. Yeah, he just scored a goal in opening day, which I believe that equals the same amount of goals that he has scored for like 64 games with some of his previous La Liga club. I mean, that's quite amazing. And that's the beauty of MLS. If you struggle in Europe, some players come to MLS and they always light it up. Although that also could be a criticism of MLS because, it looks like it's a very kind of easy league for any big or average European player to just come to here and they will just dominate. Which, usually it's the case, but not always the case. But either way, next up, Dallas. They play against Galaxy in this game. Dallas, of course, drew 1-1 to New England at home, while the Galaxy, as I mentioned, They won 2-1 against the Chicago Fire at home. And you know the funny thing about this game? Dallas Twitter page actually trolled Zlatan coming into this meeting and basically put up some very hard facts about Zlatan and kind of did like a little kind of political kind of advertisement where they basically put some hard facts on their opponent. And some of the hard facts include the fact that, you want to break every single record, but guess what? You need to score 122 goals to basically beat Landon Donovan and soon to beat Chris Wondolowski all-time goal-scoring record this season, which, yeah, that's not gonna happen, is it? Now, the dangerous thing about doing that is because if you do that, and Zlatan is known as the Lion, if you tame the Lions, he is gonna react, and it would be very interesting to see how Zlatan will react to this game and whether or not is he gonna be extra fired up and he is just going to just score a hat-trick in this game and just completely that whole troll thing with Zlatan, that's going to completely backfire in a big way. But the good news for Dallas, and at least for their social media page, Dallas has a very good record against the Galaxy. In the last 5 meetings, Dallas, of course, won on the road 3-2, and then they, of course, beat the Galaxy by that same score at home. And then they beat the Galaxy 5-1 back in 2017, but that was the game that is known as the game that, even though they blow them out, it was a game that pretty much complete the biggest collapse in the second half of the season, because with that win, they didn't make the playoffs because, well, the Quakes, of course, beat Minnesota and score a last-minute winner to knock them out of the playoffs. So, yeah, that, it looks good on the board, but when you look at what happened on that day, yeah, Dallas fan would not want to talk about that game and what happened in that moment. Dallas, of course, then beat the Galaxy 2-1 on the road, and then the Galaxy drew 0-0 against FC Dallas in the last 5 meetings, and like I said, Dallas has pretty much owned the Galaxy. They have won the last 4 meetings against them, and, when you look at this team, after the first week, you can clearly see why goal scoring is going to be a big problem for them. I mean, their defense looked very good last week, but goal scoring is definitely going to be an issue for this team, and they're playing against a team that goal scoring is definitely not a problem for them. And also the Galaxy this week just signed Joe Corona, who is pretty much the replacement of Giovanni Dos Santos, and of course we'll talk about that again in the next week episode of News of the Week. But yeah, the Galaxy, they are definitely loaded up to try to get back to where they were a couple of years ago, and this is going to be a tough match for Dallas, even with the good record that they had in the previous meeting. Next up, Houston. They play against Montreal. So Houston, of course, drew 1-1 in their last match at home against RSL, but they did lose at home, and I want to put at home in quotation mark because, let's be honest, was that really a home game for Houston against Tigres in the CCL when 95% of the stadium was filled with Tigres fans? But they lost that one 2-0. Montreal, of course, won against San Jose 2-1 on the road. The last 5 meetings, Montreal beat Houston 1-0. Houston then beat Montreal 3-1 at home. Montreal then win against Houston 1-0, and Houston, of course, beat Montreal 3-0, and Houston, of course, beat Montreal again at home by a final score of 3-2. And really, when you look at these last 5 meetings, it seemed like the home team are the one that usually do very well in this head-to-head matchup. And in fact, if you even go all the way back and you look at all the meetings between these two teams, the home team has either win or draw every single match. No road team in this head-to-head match has actually won a game in this head-to-head matchup. So yeah, for Montreal, they definitely have some history that is gonna be going against them, and they might make history for the first time to become a road team to win in this matchup. Although Houston, for the Dynamo, I think for Wilmer Cabrera, what he needs to do in this game is just start the strongest starting 11. I mean, I get it. You have another midweek game against Tigres down in Mexico, but let's be honest. Are you going to really pull that one off? Like, you know, we saw what happened when they tried to put their strongest squad against Tigres at home, and they still got battered. So is there going to be anything different when they're playing on the road? Yeah, I don't think so. I think for Houston, they need to just accept the fact that CCL, their hope of going to the final of CCL is all but finished, although I don't think anybody would have thought Houston would have got all the way to CCL. It would be something like a Montreal miracle a couple of years ago in CCL for Houston to go all the way to the final. And after that Tigres resort, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So for the Dynamo, the best thing they need to do is just put their best team in this game and maybe put a couple of reserve in that Tigres game and give the reserve some experience in that game, even though they're probably going to lose that one too. And just move on. Just focus on the league now. But yeah, next up, RSL. They play against the Whitecaps. So RSL drew 1-1 against Houston in the last match, while Vancouver lost 3-2 against a resurgent Minnesota team at home. The last 5 meetings, Vancouver beat RSL 2-0 at home, and then RSL beat Vancouver at their home stadium 2-1. Vancouver, of course, won 3-2 against RSL, which is also at home. RSL, of course, beat Vancouver 3-0 at their own home, and then Vancouver, of course, beat RSL at their own home 2-0. And just like this meeting, this one, the home team usually are the one that is coming out as the victor, as it has shown in the last 5 meetings. And I think if you even go all the way back to look at some of the other meetings that they have, I think the last time a road team actually won in this head-to-head meeting was back in 2014, when I think it was RSL or Vancouver that got a 1-0 lead on the road. But other than that, it's usually the home team that gets the resort. So certainly RSL is going to be the favorites in this game, and I don't see how RSL isn't. You know, this Vancouver team, after what we saw against Minnesota, it's clear that it's still a work in progress team. It's still clear that they're kind of like in a similar situation with what the Quakes are in, and also with what Cincinnati is in right now, where they're not quite ready yet. The chemistry level between the team is not quite ready yet, and it shouldn't be surprised because, you know, they got a new manager that is implementing his new system that's gonna take time to evolve, and the fact that they completely overhauled the squad, and you're not going to really start playing very well if you just completely overhaul the squad from the previous season. It's gonna take a couple of weeks to get it going. So I expect RSL to win that one, but you never know. Maybe Vancouver can actually get a win and maybe pull off an upset. And if they do, that would be a great way to start the Marc Dos Santos era with a road victory. Next up, speaking of San Jose, the Quakes are going to be playing against Minnesota. So the Quakes, of course, lost 2-1 against Montreal at home at the season opener, which is the first season opener that we lost since 2013. Minnesota, of course, won 3-2 against Vancouver, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago. And in the last 4 meetings, yeah, I don't really need to talk about it because I mentioned it a lot in some of my match vlog and in some of my previous preview, where we never lost Minnesota in our history. We won 3-1 in the last meeting, and then we beat them 3-2 in the season opener last year, and then we beat 3-2 in probably a game that is going to go down as one of the greatest game the Quakes have ever played, and a game that it's going to remember a long time, about 10 years from now, when they look back at the history of the Quakes, because that was the game that got us into the playoffs, and they got us into the playoffs in the most dramatic way by scoring a 93rd minute winner. And then, of course, in the inaugural meeting, the Quakes, of course, beat Minnesota 1-0 on the road. So when you look at the last 4 meetings, it's favorites San Jose in this game, but you know the fact that with the Quakes, after what I saw from the last game, it's clear that this team is not ready to compete yet. I talk about the attack, of how it's still being very slow, and I think right now for teams, what teams would would do now against us is that all they need to do is just sit back and defend, because they know that we don't have a lot of speed up front, and we also don't have like a lot of creativity up front, so they can just do what Montreal did, which is just sit back and be compact, because we're not gonna break you guys down. And then they can, on the attacking end, they can just go on the counter attack and completely exploit our defense, which is something that is a big issue with our team, and a big issue with the system that Mateus Almeida is running. And it saw in the last game where against Montreal a couple of times when the Impact decided to go on the break, they really caught us out on the break. And I can't imagine when teams that are good with counter-attacking, how are we going to deal with that? Like, we are going to get absolutely ripped apart, because I know Montreal is not one of the best counter-attacking team, but when you face against some good counter-attacking team, yeah, we're going to get absolutely ripped to shit in the counter-attack. And I won't say Minnesota is a good counter-attacking team, but they do have a lot of speed on that team with Darwin Quintero, that he is going to just absolutely torment our defense. And I won't be surprised if Adrian Hevel just decided that, you know what, when we go on the counter-attack, just give it to Darwin Quintero. He's just going to run past that Quakes defense like it's nothing, and he's going to score goals against us. So, yeah, the bottom line is, I'm not that confident coming into this game. I think that if we can get a win, then it will be really good, because that will maybe give us a little bit momentum as we're going to head into a very murderous stretch where we have to play against the Red Bulls on the road, and then we play LAFC and Portland. And did I also mention in the latter part of April, we have Seattle and Sporting KC that we have to face, and that Seattle match is on the road. Yeah, this is why I said that I'm not very confident coming into this year, because when I look at the schedule, it does not favor the Quakes, and they even said that it was the second hardest schedule that any team in the league has to face heading into this year. The only hardest one was Orlando City. So yeah, either way, let's now switch boards now. Right, next up, Seattle. They play against the Rapids, and this is going to be a very, very good game, because both of these teams are coming into this game with a lot of confidence. The Sounders just completely destroyed FC Cincinnati and spoiled FC Cincinnati inaugural match by beating them 4-1 at home, while Colorado drew 3-3 against Portland in that Snow Classico, and it was a dramatic Snow Classico. Like, Colorado in that game, they showed so much resilience and so much fight that they actually came back twice in that game, and they came back twice while they were down to 10 men against a team that made it to MLS Cup last year. I mean, that is just absolutely incredible. And if you ask any Rapids fan after this game, even though it's only a point for them, and they did drop points at home, they would say that it feels like all 3 points were taken in that game. Consider how much fight that this Rapids team has, and I think that's what the Sounders is maybe going to find out in this game. Although the Rapids are playing on the road, and usually when that happens, the Rapids are not going to do very well. Their road record, as I mentioned from last season, is not very good, and the Sounders, with the way that they play against FC Cincinnati, yeah, there's a good chance that they can just roll over Colorado in this game, and that Colorado, even though they have a lot of confidence, they got to beware that Seattle, especially on the attack, they are going to really have to worry about. In the last 5 meetings, Seattle beat Colorado 4-0. Then Seattle, of course, won 2-1 against Colorado on the road. And then they beat Colorado again at home 3-0. And then they beat Colorado on the road again 3-1. And then the only win from Colorado against Seattle was, I think, a couple of years ago when they beat them 1-0 on the road. But other than that, the head-to-head record certainly favorites the Sounders. But either way, this should be a very, very exciting game. And by the way, this is also the last game that is going to be this week on Saturday. And this, of course, is the nightcap, which means that moving on into the next match, that's when the Sunday game starts. And the first Sunday game, or the first two Sunday game, because this one and this one actually starts at the same time at 12 o'clock my time, 3 o'clock Eastern time, is Sporting KC versus the Union. So Sporting KC, of course, lost in a dramatic way and a heartbreaking way 2-1 against LAFC, where they gave up a 94th minute winner. And then the Union lost 3-1 against TFC, and they definitely do not look very good in that first game and in that season opener. The last 5 meetings, excluding the US Open Cup, the Union, of course, beat Sporting KC 2-0. Sporting KC drew 0-0 to the Union, and then the Union beat Sporting KC again at home 2-0, but not until Sporting KC would win at home against the Union 3-2, and then the Union basically returned the favorite and win at home against Sporting KC 2-1. For Sporting KC, I think they're going to rest a lot of starters in this game. I mean, I'm pretty sure Peter Vermees have learned his mistake from last week, where you don't put all your starters in if they only have like a 3-day rest, and the fact that you have a CCL game that is coming up. I think Peter Vermees from that last game clearly overlooked Independiente, and they were very fortunate that they only lost by a final score of 2-1 in that game. I mean, Independiente had a lot of chance in that game that could have just blow the first leg open and do what they did against TFC. But fortunately for Sporting KC, heading into the second leg against them, all they need is just one goal. And if they can get that one goal and not concede an away goal, they're moving on into the semi-final. Although, again, I think even though they only need one goal, I think they still need their best starter out there against Independiente, and that, this is a good opportunity to do that, because you're playing against a Union team that definitely does not have a lot of confidence and still are trying out this pressing system. And it will be interesting to see if Jim Curtin decided to press on the road. I mean, usually when you see teams that are committed to the pressing system, unless you are a team that is, you have success in terms of doing the press on the road, like the Red Bulls and Sporting KC, for example, you don't usually see a lot of team press on the road. So it will be interesting to see what they're going to do. And this is also a good opportunity for the Union to maybe even get a win, because Sporting KC is basically playing against their B team, and that, you have a chance to go on the road and maybe get a win. And if they don't win this game, then that pressure is going to continue to mount on Jim Curtin, although I'm pretty sure a lot of Union fans are probably screaming at Jim Curtin's head after the first game and after how bad things have gone. So yeah, we shall see how this game will go. But now moving on into the next match, which is NYCFC versus DC United. NYCFC drew 2-2 against Orlando City away, while DC, of course, won 3-1 at home against Atlanta. Last 5 meeting, DC, of course, won 3-1 against NYCFC in the last meeting. Both of them drew in the meeting at Yankee Stadium 1-1. Then DC United win again at home against NYCFC 2-1. But then NYCFC beat DC United by a final score of 4-0. And then DC United beat NYCFC 3-1 at home. And keep in mind, these two matches are coming into, like, these 4 matches, the only one that had Wayne Rooney and Lucho Acosta just firing on all cylinders was this match between them and NYCFC later in the year. So, when I look at this matchup, I think DC, with the way that they played last week, they definitely show that they can not only make top 3 in the Eastern Conference, but they can maybe go at and even challenge the Red Bulls and Atlanta, where I said before that the Eastern Conference, I feel like Atlanta and the Red Bulls are like pretty much the standards, and then it's rest of the team. But with how DC played against Atlanta, and I know in that match Atlanta didn't really start their strongest team, but DC looked really good against Atlanta in that game. And I think the only reason why I'm still not buying the stock of DC United and saying that they could, I'm buying the stock that they can finish very high in the table, but I'm not buying the stock the fact that they can really challenge Atlanta and the Red Bulls in the Eastern Conference is, can they win on the road? Last season, the road was not a kind of friend for DC United, and even when they were in the second half of the season, where majority of the time they were playing at home, they did had a couple of road games, and they didn't win any of those road games. So yeah, if DC can start winning on the road, then I gotta say they could definitely challenge the Red Bulls and Atlanta for those top two spots in the Eastern Conference. And for NYCFC, yeah, they got really lucky to draw 2-2 against Orlando City thanks to VAR. And this is definitely, I think for NYCFC and for Dome Turin, if he starts to not get any resort, and I don't want to make some early kind of just overreaction and said NYCFC is going to look similar to last year where they, well, similar to what happened in the second half of the season where they were not very good. But if they play like what they did against Orlando City, and the fact that they continue to not get resort, then no doubt that Dome Turin is definitely going to be on the hot seat. And yeah, NYCFC fans would not. I mean, I don't know. If you're an NYCFC fan, do you think Dome Turin is on the hot seat? I hear some people say that Dome Turin isn't really on the hot seat, but I believe he is after what happened last year and how, he was the guy that they trusted, that is the guy that basically will bridge the gap between what Patrick Vieira did to this team and then maybe even make it a little bit better, but it seemed like he just made it worse. So, yeah, we'll see how that situation will go. But next up, and speaking of Atlanta, they play against FC Cincinnati and play against the New Boys. So Atlanta, of course, lost 3-1 against DC United away, as I mentioned before. And then FC Cincinnati, as I also mentioned before, lost 4-1 against Seattle away. And I was absolutely shocked. The goal that FC Cincinnati scored was not the goal of the week. The goal of the week was actually Shinashiki goal that give Colorado the equalizer in the 94th minute. And sure, okay, yes, that was a good goal in terms of the moment, but I thought goal of the week was supposed to look at some of the most beautiful goals that you will ever see, and it's not really just about the moment. And that goal from Cincinnati, not only it was a great moment for this club franchise because it was the first goal in their history in MLS, but it was actually a really good goal. Like the way that Berton hits it from about 20 yards, that was just amazing. And I'm shocked the fact that that wasn't the goal of the week. And this is why I don't do a video talking about breaking down which one do I think is the goal of the week, because I have a feeling MLS is going to completely not choose the fan favorite and just completely botch that kind of award. This, of course, is the first ever meeting between both of these teams, and I'm assuming Atlanta is going to put their B team in this game because, they need all the help. They really need the best team in that CCL game against Monterey at home, and that they need the best of their team to try to overcome that 3-0 deficit. And, for Atlanta, these last two games has definitely not looked very good, and you could argue these last two games are probably the worst in franchise history, especially the Rayados game, where that looked like, in my opinion, was the worst game that I ever seen Atlanta play, and maybe even worse than when they lost 4-1 last year against TFC right at the end of the season. So for Atlanta, they need to start to pick themselves up, and even though they are going to be playing against a B team, against an FC Cincinnati team that is, clearly not really ready in terms of MLS product, I think they need to really win this game. And I'm not going to say that, one thing that I'm also want to say about Atlanta is that I've been hearing a lot of talks of how people want Frank de Boer out, and I understand Frank de Boer has not done a good job with this team, but the thing is, the system that he's implemented, which is the 3-4-3 system, it's going to take time, okay? And I think it is very harsh to say that after 4 games where it looks like the 3-4-3 system isn't working, that, maybe he is not the right man to do. And we shall see if Frank de Boer decide to adjust the system. If this 3-4-3 system that he is using continue to not work. But to say that Frank de Boer should get fired after just 4 poor games with Atlanta, yeah, that's a little bit over dramatic, and that feels similar to what a lot of Premier League kind of teams fans would say, that after just 4 games they want their coach fired because they haven't really got the result. And I know Atlanta is supposed to be the standard of MLS, but seriously, I'm just kind of baffled the fact that people want De Boer out, even though he's only in charge of this team for 4 games, and he only managed this team 1 game in MLS. And I know they lost that one and it wasn't a good one, but still, that's just ridiculous. The fact that people would think that De Boer needs to be sacked straight away and thinking about him getting out of the team. But having said that, Atlanta definitely do have problems, and I think if they do not get, like I said, if they do not get a result against FC Cincinnati, and then the next game against Rayados, if they do not play well again, then there is definitely going to be a level of concern of how something is going wrong with this team. And I said in the CCL review, I think the reason why things have gone wrong with Atlanta so far is because, one, the system that Frank de Boer is putting isn't really working, and 2, they missed Miguel Almiron very badly. And Pity Martinez was supposed to be the guy to replace him, and I wouldn't say that he hasn't been just horrible with Atlanta, but he hasn't been like that type of, he hasn't been what Miguel Almiron, where he was the anchor of that attack and he was the heart of that attack. And PT Martinez, I think he could potentially do it, but so far it hasn't really shown just yet. But finally, LAFC, they play against the Portland Timbers. So LAFC, as I mentioned before with Sporting KC, they beat Sporting KC at home in a dramatic fashion by scoring a 94-minute winner from Diamande to win 2-1. And then Portland, of course, drew 3-3 in another dramatic game, but unlike LAFC, it was a pretty heartbreaking one where they drew 3-3 against Colorado, despite the fact that they had a man advantage and gave up those 2 goals when they had a man advantage. In the last 3 meetings, including the US Open Cup, Portland, of course, beat LAFC in the inaugural meeting 2-1. LAFC then drew 0-0 in the return leg, and then in the US Open Cup quarterfinal last year, LAFC beat Portland to move on into the semifinal. And I think LAFC is going to be slightly the favorite coming into this game because they have a lot of confidence coming out of that 2-1 win. Whereas Portland, that was a really tough kind of resort, and it really felt like all 3 points was dropped in that game against Colorado because of the way that they had a lot of chance in that game, and they looked like for sure that they were gonna win that one. I mean, they didn't play very good, even though I don't think anybody expect the fact that when you play a game in snow, it's usually never going to be very pretty. So we'll see how Portland, of course, bounce back in this game. But having said that, like I said about Portland, they didn't do very well on the road last year. And I think if they do lose this game, I'm not going to jump the conclusion and say that, okay, Portland is back to where they were last year, where they just couldn't win on the road, because it's against LAFC. Playing away at LAFC, it is incredibly hard to do. Unless you don't have any fans that of course go to that game, then it is pretty easy to do, as my Quakes team, of course, proved to everybody that they can still beat LAFC at Bank of California Stadium, except if there is actually nobody there to witness. But yeah, the bottom line is I think LAFC is going to be favorites in this game because they've been so good at home. Bank of California Stadium, alongside with Audi Field and even Providence Park and Mercedes-Benz Stadium, are probably the hardest place to get a result if you're the away team. So yeah, there you go. That is pretty much it for the preview. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of these games, and let me know in the comments below your prediction for these games. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time. I'll see you guys on Sunday for the review video.